consulting work on American
feeling in the room was
Don't ever say to her that her
What about the Chicago incident?
Introductory discussion on the ethical
We left
more of a community.
before China took back over.
Currently doing in autism.
Cosmopolitan is the world's best-selling women's magazine with more than 50 editions sold in over 100 countries. We talked with one of the women behind the success of this magazine empire. Donna Kalajian-Lagani is the Senior Vice President and Publishing Director of Cosmopolitan magazine. She has used her passion and expertise to lead Cosmopolitan to record-breaking earnings. Her journey began here at Penn State, where she majored in business and finance. In 1995, Lagani was elected to the American Advertising Federation's Hall of Achievement. She talked to us about the competitive world of magazine publishing and about what it means to be a fun, fearless female. Donna Kalajian-Lagani, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
You graduated from Penn State back in 1975 with a degree in business and finance. What brings you back to campus?
I got reacquainted with some of the faculty last year when they came and visited me at Cosmopolitan, and they invited me back, and I said, if I come back, I really want to do something that helps the kids. So I'm teaching 2 classes. Who would have ever thought that a couple decades later, instead of being a student, I'd be in the teacher role? So I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun day.
Now, you're talking to people about the publishing industry, but when you graduated, you had your sights on Wall Street, and in fact, you spent a year on Wall Street and even moved up to a minor management position, but decided this is not for me. What happened?
You know, back then, Wall Street was very much about men. And I wasn't brought up in a class society in my family, and when I first entered Wall Street, it was to be a female was not on the same level. And I really think probably what the issue really was, Patty, is that if I'd gone into Wall Street and I'd gone into sales, if I'd gone into stock sales or bond sales, I would have loved it because that's what I do, that my passion is selling. But I went into international finance, and there was a lot of spreadsheets translating Eastern European banks, Western European banks, P&L statements to American accounting standards, and it just wasn't exciting enough for me.
And here you were, this 5'1", petite, beautiful young woman, 20 years old. It must have been a bit intimidating in a way. Now, today we look at Maria Bartoloma, who basically rules Wall Street, and so that the environment for women certainly has changed.
I'm sure the environment has changed so much on Wall Street. I mean, it's just been forever since I've been there. I can't ever say I was honestly intimidated. I just knew that I hadn't found my passion. And although I hadn't found my passion, I was working very, very hard. And I was doing well, but I thought at that young age, I think I was 20 or 21 at the time, I said, if I'm going to put so much energy and passion into something, I'm going to do it for something I love. So I was very, very lucky, Patty, that in my second shot out, I found magazine publishing, which I do love.
Your second shot out, as you said, it was publishing. I want to get back for a minute to Wall Street, because this sort of epitomizes the way you approach everything. One, the passion you talked about, but when you applied for that first job on Wall Street, you memorized the annual report.
Oh, that's a funny story.
Which I think
I have to tell that story, huh? So I went into New York City, and I live in New Jersey, and I got out of the subway and looked up, and there was One Wall Street. And One Wall Street at the time was a company, a commercial bank called Irving Trust. And I looked up and said, this is a really beautiful building. I think I'd love to work here. It was all Art Deco. So I went to interview with Human Resources, and before I got there, I grabbed the annual report, and having studied finance at Penn State, I knew how to read an annual report. Memorized a couple of things and went upstairs and said, gee, I've just had a passion for wanting to work at Irving Trust Company, and this is where I've really set my goals, and I'd love to start here. And I quoted some statistics that I had memorized from the annual report, and about 5 hours later, I had my first job. I'm not sure I would recommend that's how. There's a lot easier research you can do today on the internet, of course, but that's how I got my first job.
And I think you must have been inspired by the fact that your mother was a working woman, and in many ways, the fun, fearless kind of female that you promote through your magazine. Tell us a little bit about your mother and her influence on your career.
Oh, my mom was a tremendous influence in my career. She is still my soulmate. And I think, you know, growing up, my mom was a commercial artist. And for many years of their marriage.
Illustrating comics,
yeah,
which is not something you think of.
she did comic books. If you remember Mighty Mouse, she did a lot of the Mighty Mouse series. And she taught me from the time I was very young. She said, you know, grow up, get married if you want, have a great marriage. My mom and dad always had a great marriage, but she always said, make sure that you could take care of yourself. So fall in love, get the whole 9 yards out of the deal, but make sure that you can take care of yourself. So a job was always just part of what I always knew was going to be part of my life.
So you go from the small publishing company to Women's Day.
Yeah. Women's Day at the time was 8 million circulation. They sold one copy at a time, 100% at the newsstand, and at the time it was really the epitome of the consumer magazine publishing industry. They had a reputation, it was all men, they had a reputation of being one of the finest staffs around. And I thought, well, if I'm going to set my sights moving from a trade publication to Women's Day, let me set it really high. And it took me about 6 months to get that job. And I swear my boss at the time, Jay Berzon, who was a real mentor of mine, rejected me 6 months in a row, kept telling me, go away, go away, go away. And I swear, I think the only reason he ever hired me was because he thought that that would be the one way he could get rid of me. Hire me, and if I didn't work out, fire me. But it did work out pretty well there, actually.
You say that there have been lots of very nice bosses along the way who have told you, you can't do it. You can't do it.
You know, that was the only one boss that told me I couldn't do it. Was a marvelous boss who was at Women's Day, and he knew I had very high ambitions. I was the only woman on the sales staff, and he said to me, you know, Donna, I know you really enjoying this and you're working really hard, but just so you know, you're never going to get into management. And he wasn't saying it to be mean-spirited in any way. He was saying it to temper, I think, my expectations so I wouldn't be disappointed. And when he said it, I thought to myself, you have no idea, honey, you know, that you are just wrong. And happily, at Women's Day, I moved into the beauty management spot, which at the time was funny because they had no beauty advertising. So again, I think they thought, give the girl the beauty spot. And we grew that business a lot. And I ended up managing 10 people and really enjoying. I think I was there for about 8 or 9 years. I haven't jumped a lot in my career.
Your motto is sort of, and I think men who told you can't do this probably fueled this, shoot for the moon and you might land on a star.
Isn't that a great line? And that line I got from Jay Berzon, and it's true. And I've actually had many female bosses, including my current fabulous president of Hearst magazine. So I've had fantastic female role models and mentors in my life and in my career. And I hope that I'm doing the same thing for the young women that work for us now.
So from Women's Day, you made your way to Ladies' Home Journal, where you became the first publisher in the magazine's 112-year history.
Wow. I forgot that. That was a long time ago.
But was there extra pressure knowing that you're the first one, and if you don't make good on this, that, you know, lots riding on it?
You know, I never think of myself as how would a woman do it. I would just always think about what's the best way to get it done. And I made sure, actually very early in my career, Patty, I went to a trainer, and she said, you need to learn about sports and you need to lose the jewelry and, you know, be really conservative in the way you dress. And in those days it was, you know, little bow ties for women and suits. And I still wear my black suits, but I never lost the jewelry and I never learned anything about sports and I never figured out how to golf very well. So I really believed that by working hard and, you know, intelligence and being strategic and being tactical, that's what would overcome. It wasn't whether I was a woman or not. Now, I have to say, one of the things I took very seriously in my career as a woman is that when I had our son, I knew that people would be looking at my behavior to see what would happen to other women after me. So I took that very seriously. I thought, I am not going to miss one beat on my business, and as I was out on maternity leave, because I do think that does affect women after you, and I think people do make those kind of judgments. If you are a great role model, I want to make sure I always pave the way for women to go way beyond where I will ever accomplish in my own career.
Well, I want to ask you a question that men don't get asked,
Yeah.
and that is,
What?
how difficult is it to balance that family work life? Because you have an incredibly busy schedule, and I want to talk about that in just a moment, but how do you do it, and what do you make of the fact that I'm asking you that, and not many men get asked that question?
Maybe many men don't ask that question because probably the women are still the caretakers in the home. But I balance it relatively easily, to tell you the truth, because I have an incredible husband who is a terrific daddy. Our son is a dream when he's not being a monster. He's quite a dream. And I've had great support in my life. You know, we've had the same nanny has been with us since Joey's been born. And I have a great team at the office that's supportive. So honestly, I haven't had difficulty balancing it.
Your husband's in the same business, which must help. He understands what it takes to do what you're doing.
Yeah, Joe and I worked together for many years at Women's Day and then Ladies Home Journal. He was most recently, about 2 years ago, the publisher of House and Garden magazine, and he left magazine publishing to go into the internet world. So he's with a company called Glam Media now. And yes, I think we don't actually come home and talk a whole lot about business, but it's awfully nice to know that when I have a critical issue, or he has a critical issue at work, that there's someone that has no interest except making sure that we give one another the very best advice. So yes, of course, that has been helpful, having his support.
Give us an idea. What does a typical workday involve for you?
It's always fun. It's always different. My best days is when I'm out of the office a lot. So, you know, primarily my job is to drive revenue and advertising dollars into Cosmopolitan. And all the money in a magazine is made on the advertising side of the business. So a lot of it is spent thinking about sort of as a longer term strategy of what we do with the business, how we grow the advertising revenue. But the day in, day out is meeting with staff, working on strategy, working on programs, and going out with clients and talking to them about why Cosmopolitan is the place that they should be spending all of their money.
Well, we should say that Cosmopolitan is a magazine that has evolved, that has
Yes.
a really fascinating history. It began in the late 19th century, and at the time was a family magazine. It wasn't a women's magazine until about 44 years or so ago.
It was a small literary magazine that was failing. And the story is that Helen Gurley Brown, who was the visionary for Cosmopolitan, had written a book called Sex and the City.
This is in 1962, so it was...
Excuse me, Sex and the Single Girl. Sex and the Single Girl. Sorry, but we did Sex and the Single Girl before there was Sex and the City. Sex and the Single Girl, and she got so many letters that she would sit home and answer every single letter on her typewriter. And her husband, David Brown, said, you know, honey, instead of answering one letter at a time, why don't you put all this great information in a magazine? So she and David shopped the idea of this single girl's Bible to the Hearst Corporation. And when they met Helen, they said, well, we have this little magazine that's failing. It's Cosmopolitan.
Failing despite the fact that Ida Tarbell, John Upton, Sinclair Lewis, big names like that were writing really, really good things for the magazine, but it just wasn't selling.
Working. It wasn't resonating with the consumer or the advertiser at the time. So they gave it to Helen and said, here, take this magazine, see what you can do with it. And sure enough, from the first issue of Cosmopolitan that was published, we were profitable. The first issue dared to talk about the pill on the cover of the magazine, which was unheard of in those days. And Helen's belief, and she is the original Fun Fearless female, she and my mom, of course, the original Fun Fearless females, but you know, her belief was women could have it all. Women could have the Manolas, the MBA, and the man. And her mantra was to tell women to go out, work hard, and you can accomplish whatever you want. And very much, Patty, that's the same mantra of what Cosmopolitan is about today. It's being women's best friends and cheerleaders and saying, you can have it all, honey. You know, the world is your oyster, just go for it.
Well, what does it mean to have it all today? What do young women think having it all is?
I think that's changed really from the time that I grew up thinking of having it all. I've seen a change in the women. I mean, to me, having it all was having the three things I said. You know, having the great career, having a great relationship, having a healthy life, God knows. I find that women today, unfortunately, not a lot of women want my job. Not a lot of people want my job.
Because it's too demanding.
It's demanding. And I think they want more, even though I feel I have an excellent work-life balance, perhaps from their lens, they want it different. So they would rather leave the office and, you know, at 6 o'clock and not think about, you know, having to figure out how to make next week's numbers or next month's numbers, or
go straight to a black tie event, you know? when you've already put in a good 12 hours.
And that doesn't mean that they're not extraordinarily hardworking and ambitious and passionate about what they do. But I think they compartmentalize it a little differently. So I always had as my goal that I wanted to be the publisher of a magazine from the time I entered the magazine business. And I set my sight there, and happily for me, I was able to accomplish it with a lot of, you know, great help and support. I think they're different aspirations today.
When Cosmo first hit newsstands, women couldn't wait for the next issue, and there are lots of sociologists and women's studies professors who will say how liberating it was and how it expanded the numbers of choices that women felt that they had. But of course, there was this segment of the population, lots of men, that were rubbed the wrong way by this, conservative women, and there was even some feminists who who were really disturbed by the emphasis on beauty and on man-pleasing. My guess is that still exists. It
doesn't exist nearly as much as it had, and I have to say, you know, Gloria Steinem was a great supporter of Helen Gurley Brown's, and I think the early female liberal women recognized how much Helen was doing to liberate women. And I think the difference is that Helen believed that you could still be feminine, you could still be beautiful, you could still want to dress nicely, and she understood something that people now are very comfortable with, that the most important thing still in a life is your relationship. So, you know, if we were off the air, you and I would be talking about our families and our kids, and gee, I love the way your hair looks today. And instead of it being thought, that's something that's empowering. I think when I was going to school, probably if they'd asked me, what's more important, your career, you know, finding your soulmate or the perfect career? Everyone in my generation would have said, oh, finding the perfect career. We would have meant finding the perfect relationship. Now women have come so far that women don't need a man in their life, but they want a best friend, they want a partner, they want someone who's support. And I think that's a universal truth, Patty, and that's what's made Cosmopolitan successful around the globe, is that we recognize the most important thing to women is the relationship in their life. And that relationship could be with the men in their life, their girlfriends in their life, their children, their parents.
You said around the globe, and I think a lot of people will be surprised that Cosmo, and Cosmo really is becoming, it is a brand, it has an influence and a presence in 50 countries. Give us some idea of just how widespread this magazine is.
We actually have 60 editions, and we're sold in over 100 countries around the world. And I'll tell you, 2 years ago, we were in Spain for a holiday, and a woman that I met said that when Franco was taken out of office there, that Cosmopolitan came in, and she said everyone went and bought Cosmopolitan, and it liberated the women in Spain. And I thought, wow, what a powerful statement for someone to say about our magazine brand. And just about any country we go into, we become the #1 best-selling magazine. Cosmo is an icon. We have brand familiarity like Coca-Cola does. You know, everyone knows Cosmo around the world, and women are empowered by Cosmo around the world.
I guess I'm almost I'm not shocked, that's too big a word, but China, India, Israel, Russia, South Africa. Is it a different magazine? I know you're not involved in the international publication, but is it a different magazine, or is it essentially what Americans are looking at?
I think the heart of Cosmo around the world is the same. We are in joint ventures around the world, so we want to make sure that the local, it really suits what the women want locally. But the iconic nature of Cosmopolitan, the covers, I mean, one of the things that I love about our brand that I don't think you could say about just about any other magazine brand is you could cover the name Cosmopolitan and you know from the cover that it's Cosmo. And you will see that whether you picked up a Cosmo in China or Russia or in America, that you know it's signature, iconic Cosmopolitan.
Well, let's talk about covers, because there are a couple of magazine covers that I think, even if you don't read magazines, you are familiar with these. And I'm thinking of the 1981 Rolling Stone magazine. Yeah. It's Yoko Ono lying flat on the ground. She's got a black turtleneck on and blue jeans. And John Lennon is curled up on her. He's naked. Now, everyone knows that one. Then another one that I think that is iconic is 1991 Vanity Fair, and it's Demi Moore, very, very pregnant, on the cover with her hands over certain body parts. Is there a cover to you that says Cosmo, or one that created the biggest sensation ever?
You know, I think our covers, not really, because I think all of our covers are iconic. And what is so distinctive about Cosmopolitan is that we sort of have always, for decades now, done that three-quarter shot. It's always about great hair, it's always about great makeup, and really importantly, it's always about great confidence. Now, for 30 years, Francesco Scavullo shot our covers, and it was in the days that you only needed, there were no celebrities that you had to put on a cover then, so it was all about models. So it was really capturing the essence of what it is to be fun, fearless female, and what it is, not about woman on pedestal, but woman in power. And I think, of course, our cover lines are always signature, Patty. So you can you can see Cosmo by looking at that top left cover line.
Is the magazine that shows up in mailboxes, the subscription magazine, and it's one of the, I think it's one of the, or is the most subscribed women's magazine in the world, I think. But is the one that shows up in your mailbox different from what we see on newsstands? Because I know some magazines have a more risque newsstand magazine than the one they send, so that if Junior sees it, he doesn't think mom's reading something too racy.
No, we have the same newsstand cover as we do subscriber cover. And we're the largest newsstand magazine in the world. So we sell almost 2 million copies every single month on the newsstand, which is just towers over any other beauty fashion magazine, any other woman's magazine that's out there.
You say that one of the biggest challenges is beating your numbers. You've broken a number of sales records in your career. You've been with Cosmo for 14 years. You've broken a number of records. Is it possible, really, to break them year after year?
Well, in this economy, it's really challenging. So now what we have to do is say Cosmo is the brand that, especially during this economy, as women are buying fewer magazines, that they are coming to Cosmo. And this is a time that it's so important to be such a big, mass reach, efficient magazine, so that our newsstand circulation has really hardly suffered at all, in spite of the fact that other magazines with whom we compete have really fallen off the cliff. They're down 20, 30, 40% at the newsstand. But now that women are choosing, instead of perhaps 3 or 4 magazines, they're choosing 1 and 2 magazines. They're coming to the magazine they know, they trust, they love.
Our advertisers, they're in some ways in a good position. They're in a position of power because you need them, and they're disappearing. Do they drive a harder bargain today? In other words, do they ask you, excuse me, to do different things to get their name out there? I know Cosmo does all kinds of events that puts the name of its advertisers out there, something that you wouldn't have done 20 years ago.
Well, the business has evolved into that, and yes, there is a lot more programs. So one of the things that we're proud of, you mentioned Fun Fearless Female, which is when I first came, we needed to put a statement on the magazine that described both the magazine as well as our readers. And Fun Fearless Female has for 14 years done that, not only in this country, but around the world. So one of the signature platforms we created was Fun Fearless Female. a Fun Fearless Female event where we celebrated women. And then a couple years ago, we threw John Bon Jovi into the mix and saw that everyone went crazy over him. So we've now evolved that into Fun Fearless Male Awards. And I was just out in LA a couple weeks ago, and we had, and this is the really fun part of the job, of course, you know, that we had Chase Crawford there and we had Timbaland there, and we were honoring them. And we built a platform for our sponsor, Revlon, so that they were involved in the program. They were on the step and repeat. We got hundreds of millions of press impressions. Revlon was included in all of those. So yes, they do look for us to build programs and sort of share on the powerful consumer equity that Cosmopolitan has.
And in a way, you need to reinvent the magazine. It needs to be fresh and new.
Yeah.
So my guess is, can you turn it off at night? The idea machine?
You know, I can't ever turn the idea machine off. And I'm always looking, you know, we're working on a new idea now that started with an idea that I was talking to my family about. And then I thought, this is such a good idea. I wonder if we could make a business out of this. So that kind of thinking evolves to, gee, how could we make a business out of this for Cosmopolitan? And we've expanded the brand a lot because, you know, as consumers have changed, I'd love to believe that all women do is read magazines, but that's not true. You know, they're on the internet and they're on their phones and they're listening to radio. So we have, one of the things that we've done with the brand is make sure that we build assets around Cosmopolitan. So wherever a consumer, a young consumer, is engaged with media, that they're engaged with Cosmo.
So you've got a radio station, you've got TV stations in Canada and in other Iberia, different places like that. What happens on TV that might not happen in a magazine?
Well, on TV, we're in Latin America and Spain, and we just launched about a year ago, last Valentine's Day in Canada. So we have some anchor programs, like Sex and the City is one that's on Cosmo in Canada. And then we do a lot of our own original programming. And it just really brings the magazine, excuse me, brings the magazine to life in a different way.
I think lots of American women have this image of the magazine, the publishing industry, based on the hit movie The Devil Wears Prada, starring Meryl Streep, who was Miranda Priestley. Now, you're the publisher and not the editor. Meryl Streep was playing the editor.
Yes.
But to what extent is that, or isn't it, an accurate portrayal of what it is day to day in that business?
It is about as opposite as anything you could imagine.
Except the pressure, or no?
The pressure, yes, but the, you know, I talk about Cosmo as the anti-Mean Girls magazine because we as a brand are great supporters of women and champions of women. And our staff is the same way. We have a largely female staff. We have 2 fabulous men on the staff. The rest of them are a bunch of fun, fearless females. And everyone is supportive and nice. We do corny things when we make big sales. We blow horns at Cosmo and everybody was running out of their offices to celebrate each other. So I would say sort of the glitz and the glamour of it, you know, from an outside point of view is similar to what you might have seen on The Devil Wears Prada. But there's nothing mean about being a Cosmo.
Now, we talked about Helen Gurley Brown, whose story is really interesting, and in fact, she's still there in some capacity at the magazine. But now your editor is Kate White.
Yes.
Now, we're talking about a woman whose book, she's a novelist. She's written a series of 5 novels about a crime investigator. And her first book, and I can't remember the title of it, but it had the same impact that Helen Gurley Brown's 1962 book did.
Kate has done, Kate lives the Cosmo world. She does have it all. So you're right, Kate is the editor of the largest magazine in the world, and Kate is a book publisher, and I think she's up to her 6th or 7th book now, and has done incredibly successful job on doing that. So she really does have it all. She does her books at 5 and 6 in the morning and comes to work and has a great family. So she is really living the life of being, you know, having it all, being that fun, fearless female.
Well, the title of her first book, Good Girls Don't Make It, Gutsy, I forget exactly the title, but it sounds like that might be the mantra for Cosmo.
Yeah, I think, and that's why I think Kate just moved into the position of editor-in-chief so beautifully in Cosmopolitan, because she does believe that her mantra is the same as what the magazine's mantra is, and she's done an extraordinary job of continuing the brand franchise, growing it, and making it be so as successful as we are today.
That reminds me of, I mentioned the fact that you memorized the annual report when you landed your first job on Wall Street. When you landed your job at Cosmo, you actually made up a song about Cosmo, and you sang
told
it.
you that?
You sang it during the interview.
No, after I got the job, I think I sung it. I think I would have been gutsy enough to say it before they made the offer to me. Yeah, I do you remember it? Because I don't remember it, Patty. I might make you sing it, but I'm not singing it. I think it was something about Cosmo, Cosmo girl, I'm going to be a Cosmo girl. Remember that tune? Da, 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 da. Right.
Speaking of Cosmo Girl, you launched a magazine which is sort of the precursor to the Big Girl magazine, Cosmo Girl. What was the inspiration for creating a magazine that was for younger teens?
I think as we've developed the brand, as we said, into radio and television, we thought, is there a younger iteration for a younger teen? And we launched Cosmo Girl. And the credo for Cosmo Girl had always been born to lead, because we believe that this young 12, 13, 15-year-old, that these girls are born to lead, and they do know that they can really do anything. So that was really the inspiration behind the brand.
And now this is strictly online.
Now we've moved it strictly online. Mm-hmm.
And my guess is that's in response to a change in the way young girls view magazines. They'll go online, but they're not spending a whole lot of time curled up on their bed reading a magazine.
I think most people perceive that because a lot of the teen magazines have folded in the last couple years. But to tell you the truth, Patty, it has more to do with fickle advertisers than it does to do with consumers. So that the circulation and the newsstand circulation of Cosmo Girl was very strong. It's that advertisers in that space are fickle. So one year they say, I'm going to target teens, and they run 20 pages. And the next year they say, I don't want to have anything to do with teens. And magazines run on advertising. Most of the profit is advertising. So that if they lose that advertising base, it's really tough for a magazine to make it. So I think it had honestly less to do with the brand was a brand that was born to lead, the consumers did engage with. But as the advertising started to fall off, the corporation made the decision that it was best to have it online.
Speaking of advertising fall off, we're watching the biggest newspapers in the country fold. Some would say that part of their problem is that they relied too heavily on classified advertising. But I'm wondering what it is that magazines do that maybe insulates you a little from the problems that newspapers around the country are feeling.
Consumers are still so engaged with magazines. I mean, I can curl up in my bed and open a magazine and see those glossy pages and beautiful pictures. And I'm a beauty junkie. I love beauty, I love fashion, and I love the internet. We have a very important presence on the internet. But there's nothing like opening a magazine and seeing what is new in fashion and what's new in color. And I would say, especially for a brand like Cosmo, we are so engaged with the consumer. The consumer refers to us as her best friend. And she comes and learns things in Cosmo or asks things of Cosmo that she might not ask her best friend, her mom, or even her gynecologist. So I think that there is a level of an engagement and connection that magazine brands have with consumers that isn't the same as it would be on television, not the same as it is on internet. And I love the internet. I'm
curious, is there something that you've learned from Cosmo that you feel has served you well in your life?
I learn every day from Cosmo. I have for 14 years. I just believe that mantra of saying, go for it all, honey, and you could have it all. And being everyone's cheerleader is what I've gotten more out of the brand than anything, and I think what our readers get around the world from the brand.
Now, you're a very youth-oriented, very image-oriented magazine, and I'm wondering what it's like to grow older in an industry that's focused on that. And we've seen that Helen Gurley Brown has still got her foot in it. What's it like? I mean, growing
I don't
older
realize that I'm growing older, Patty.
Well, you don't
Are
look
you
like you're
telling
growing.
me that I'm growing older?
not.
Because I don't realize that. Because I still feel that I could be back on campus tomorrow as a kid. So I think, it keeps you young. And like Cosmo, it's not about a demographic. It's about a state of mind. So, I have fun every day. I believe that there's still so much work to be done at Cosmopolitan. Every day is a new challenge. we always set new goals. So I don't know if I'm old, I haven't figured it out. It's like my husband once said, don't tell Donna she's short because she doesn't know she's short. I don't know I'm short.
I want to get back to this bottom line because you've said that's the most challenging part of the job and beating the numbers from one year to the next. Even as President Obama is trying to revitalize the U.S. economy, he says once we're on track, the upping the numbers, whether it's stocks or housing prices, it's just not sustainable, that a new model is what is really going to ultimately rule the day. And I'm wondering, would a big empire like Hearst Corporation be okay with the status quo? Donna didn't come up with numbers this year that were bigger than last year's.
We're getting our numbers back. And one of the things that we've seen is that we are coming out of this much more quickly than anyone else. And I think we're going to come out of the other end better than the way we went in it, because some magazines that were based only on advertising revenue and not on a consumer base are folding. So that there was a time in the business just about a year ago that a lot of small magazines could survive because advertisers were pouring money into them. And it fragmented the dollars that even Cosmopolitan was getting. Now that marketers are focusing and saying, I need the brands that are going to help sell product for me at retail. I need the brands that have big reach, that can reach my consumer. That's only good for us. So I do believe that we're going to get Cosmopolitan back to where we were a year and a half ago.
That's why you're where you are.
I've got to believe.
It's this can-do attitude.
And we are doing it. We are doing it. I mean, I have to say through all of this, and it's very challenging times because, advertisers put a screech, just a halt on advertising. Our staff is so positive and so energized and so motivated. And we just kind of don't, if tough stuff is going to happen, it's going to happen, and we're going to march right through it and get stronger on the other side.
How do you keep a workplace like that? Because, attitude is everything. And, even if you work in some of the best environments, that sort of thing goes up and down. Well,
one of the advantages, Patty, and having been doing this a long time, like you said, is that I've lived through the tough and I've lived through the good. And, it's easy to manage when times are good. It's tougher to manage when times are rough. And I think really strong managers need to know how to keep a team motivated and focused and excited during really difficult times, and these have been really difficult times. So we make sure that we celebrate all the victories. We make sure that if we go down, we all go down fighting, and we go down fighting together if we, lose a piece of business. And we keep the spirits very high. I mean, if you walked onto the floor of Cosmopolitan, the sales floor of Cosmopolitan, you would feel an energy and an excitement, and you would say, what recession is going on here? Because we adjust the way we work. We've changed our tactics. Yes, we've unfortunately had to change some of our goals in 2009, but our sights are still set very, very high, and we're getting there.
Now, you say you really get excited watching young women make it through the ranks. Is the staff of Cosmopolitan predominantly female?
It is. We have the entire sales force is women. We'd love a couple guys if anybody wants to come work for us. And our financial director is a gentleman, and our marketing director is a gentleman, and the rest are all women. Goodness, men just don't come into Cosmo and interview, and I wish they would. We would love more men at the magazine.
Talk a little bit, if you would, about your Armenian heritage. It seems like it's something that is very important to you, and I'm wondering, what does it mean to be Armenian? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the Armenians suffered the first genocide of the 20th century, and my ancestors, many were massacred in Armenia, and my family was lucky enough to get over here. And they started with nothing, as so many other nationalities have in the country, started with nothing. And there's a very, very strong family orientation to being Armenian. There's strong family roots, great pride in what we do as families. Education was always top of mind in our family. My father was the first one who went to college. He went to Penn State in his family, and we really believe that we're all lucky to be here as Armenians today. We could have been wiped off the earth. So it's a very close group, and we believe that we need to succeed and do well. And I think that that's a lot of what growing up that way and hearing my mom and dad talk about that was very important for me to be a strong and be a good role model to people. And I love other Armenians. I mean, I always say, anybody who wants to get in my office to interview, one of two things guarantees you: a Penn State graduate, and if your name ends with IAN, which means you're Armenian, you're in.
How big of an Armenian population is there in the U.S.?
Oh, gee, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to guess 1 million or 2, maybe more. I don't really know the answer to that question. But it's very populated in New York and Detroit and Los Angeles.
So getting back to the magazine for a minute, and I'm now looking at the title of Kate White's first book in 1996, Why Good Girls Don't Get Ahead, But Gutsy Girls Do. But also you've said that the magazine's is like the antithesis of Mean Girls. So explain what's a gutsy girl, and what's the most fearless thing you've ever done in your career?
The most fearless thing I've ever done in my career is probably go for, when I was much younger, probably go for that top spot when no one thought I could do it, and just refuse to hear no. I'm very good at not hearing no, you know, I only hear yes. But I actually do believe you can be a good girl and be successful at the same time. So you've got to be gutsy, but you know, all the women that I work around are good girls. They're really good girls, but they're gutsy and they're fearless, and they go for what they want, whether it's in their personal life or their business life.
How many no's before Donna Lagani says, I'm not getting this account? Is there a number?
I don't think so. I don't know. Because there's always opportunity. To me, no is just an opportunity to go for more. I mean, I guess there is a point when someone says, I just will not advertise and I will not see you, that, you know, it takes me a bunch of slugs and a couple years later to say I'm probably better off spending my time somewhere else. But no is just a challenge to figure out how you can turn it into a yes.
Now, Cosmo has been around in the format, its present format, although changing all the time, for 44 years. Where do you see this magazine going? What kinds of new things need to happen to keep it relevant, to keep it fresh and exciting to readers?
I think Kate's doing that every day. I mean, I love, Kate has an expression, she says, Cosmo in some way is like a shark in the water. We never look behind us, we're always looking forward. So we want to anticipate what the young American woman wants. We want to be there for her. We understand her very well, and we are a champion in so many ways. One of the things that Kate is doing that I think is so relevant is that she started an initiative a couple years ago called Practice Safe Sun. And it's to encourage women to slather on SPF, to not get burned, and God knows, do not go into the tanning booth, because it will give you skin cancer. So we are on a crusade to reduce the amount of melanoma and skin cancer in this country. And the great thing, Patty, is when Cosmo says that it's alright to put on, you know, don't bake in the sun and put on SPF and use automatic tanners, self-bronzers at home, then it becomes cool when Cosmo says it. So I think those are the kind of things that we do. I mean, we just started something that I'm very proud of called Cosmo Star Launch, which was to launch a career for a fun, fearless female rock star.
So it's the American Idol of Cosmo.
It is. And we did it with a great partnership with YouTube. We asked women to upload their original performances on YouTube. We got incredible performances, had a group of record executives narrow that list down to 10, and asked consumers to vote. And we ended it with we got literally 1.9 billion media impressions from the program. We named a Star Launch winner. Mika Pauly, who has gone on to do fantastic performances. One of the groups, Fortune 457, that was a semifinalist, has gone on to sign a record contract. So those are the kind of things that Cosmo, we recognize what's the most important thing to the consumer. Music is important to her, internet is important to her, and then we build things that really resonate with that consumer.
So you're helping to launch these musical careers. Talk about what advice you would give to young Penn State graduates, for example, about making it into the publishing industry, and what kind of a person are you looking for? You came from the business side, but there are all kinds of components and opportunities.
I think that we always look for the same thing, and whether it was when I was graduating or today, especially where I grew up through sales, that's still what I do every day of my life. I sell advertising. So we're looking for someone who's got a lot of ambition, who's very gutsy, who is fearless, who's thick-skinned, because you get a lot of rejection and you don't want to get knocked down by that rejection, who's enthusiastic and passionate. And passion is something that you can't fake, Passion is something that comes through in any interview. I would also say for the young people that are graduating, I know it's tough out there today. It's a tough economy. But, as my dad always said, if you're really good, you will get a job. So don't quit and make sure you follow up. I said at a recent group of Penn Staters who came to the Hearst Corporation, I said, I get a lot of letters, and the first thing I do when I get a letter is I go right to the last line, and if it says, I look forward to hearing from you, I throw it out. If the letter says, I will follow up with you next week to set up an appointment, I go back, reread the whole letter, and tell my assistant.
So it's their expectation, and so we're getting down to your expectations need to be high.
Yes, always high. And if you come and have a great interview, first off, don't ever walk in and not be prepared. I can't tell you, Patty, that I have had people in my office that have asked in as a courtesy for a friend that haven't read the magazine. I'm thinking, oh my goodness. I mean, I memorized an annual report. You didn't even read a magazine that's around, at every newsstand in America, for goodness sakes. But follow up, because the best interview, 2 months later, I'll forget who you are. And not that I don't want to remember who you are, but a lot of stuff happens in life. So, just make sure that you follow up, because the students that are graduating today, they will get jobs, and they'll get great jobs. And it may take them a little bit longer, but if they persist and they persevere, they will get great jobs.
Now, you mentioned passion. You said if you were selling movie theater tickets, you would do it with passion.
Well, that was part of my Armenian upbringing, too, is that whatever you do it really well. So that, if I'm going to give, I am going to give 150% to whatever I do. And you're right, if I sold movie tickets, I'd move the people through faster. If I managed a movie theater, I'd compensate them to getting the people through faster. And if I had to clean up the popcorn afterwards, I'd do that too, because I think anything you do, you should do the very, very best that you possibly can.
Now, you've said, and in listening to you, I think it's true, I always knew I was going to be happy with it all, even as a child. And I'm talking about work, life, children, the whole 9 yards.
Gosh, I guess I got to thank my mom and dad for that. I did always know it. I remember once being with someone, I won't say who it is, that a very prominent newscaster, and she spoke at a luncheon we did at Ladies Home Journal, and she said, you can't have it all. You can't have the husband and the job and the child, or you certainly can't have it all at once. You could maybe have 2 out of the 3. And I thought, I don't know that I buy that. And I don't buy that. I really do think you can have it all if you can figure out, and you have to be lucky. Look, I've been lucky. I have a great, fabulous, supportive husband. We have a healthy, wonderful child. So we've had lots of blessings along the way that have helped me be this way. But I also have a very positive viewpoint. And I believe that if you look at life and think it is going to work out fine, and you
half
can
full.
be happy. It is.
It's
I'm
sort of a self-fulfilling
prophecy. I don't know what anything half empty looks like in my life. It's always half full, and there's always more to come.
No, I'm curious. You're raising a young son, and you're immersed in helping to create a certain kind of a woman, a Cosmo girl. How do you prepare him for the kind of woman that, this fierce female that you're creating on the other end?
Oh, he's ready for us. He's, it's interesting. He's traditional in many respects, And I'm forcing him to be traditional, like open the door, honey, and make sure that you let the lady order first and do all that. But he's used to being around strong women, and he's certainly very competitive in school, not only with his guys that he's competing with, but with the young girls that are there too. So he will know to never underestimate a woman in his life. That, by the way, was Ladies Home Journal's credo. Never underestimate a woman.
Well, getting back to Ladies Home Journal, I think you spent 9 years there,
Yeah.
9 at Women's Day, 14 now at Cosmo. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Oh boy, I hope that I have a job that says Donna Lagani, owner. I'd like to maybe own something on my own by then, and I'm not sure what it will be, but I love my job, and I have enjoyed every moment of it, and I can't ever imagine not working, to tell you the truth. So even after Cosmo, whenever that will be, and I hope not anytime soon, but after that, I'm sure that I will continue to work and be engaged, maybe in charity, but probably in addition to charity, my own business.
Donna Kalajian-Lagani, it was a pleasure talking with you.
It was a pleasure to
Thanks
talk
so much
with you.
for talking with us.
Thank you, Patty, so much.
I hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Donna Kalajian-Lagani, Senior Vice President and Publishing Director of Cosmopolitan Magazine. For more on her journey to the top of the publishing world, visit us at conversations.psu.edu. And we hope you'll join us for our next Conversations from Penn State.
Production funding provided in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you. Thank you. This has been a production of WPSU. A copy of the program you've just seen can be purchased through Penn State Media Sales at mediasales.psu.edu or by calling 800-770-2111.